Hey, Miguel Iturrate back here on the MMA Museum with another one of our long form interviews. And this time, like usual, we are going old school. I am joined by Lance Gibson. And I'm telling you, if you look at Sherdog and look at his record there, there's no way you can do this man justice because this man has seen a lot and been around a lot, especially in that early Northwest scene, which produced a lot of people. And this man's knowledge, at the point he's transferred it on, his kid's a star with Bellator. And that comes because this man knows a lot about MMA, NHB, and all that stuff. I am proud and happy to talk to Lance Gibson again. Lance, how you doing?
Good, man. Honored to be with you and talking to you again, brother. Like old times.
For sure, sir. Okay, so let's start from the very beginning. A little Lance Gibson. You're Tell us about how your story. Were you a wrestler in school? Were you an athlete in school? Or and then how did you transition into the MMA game? But like start like you're 10 years old. Were you thinking were you a street fighter? Were you a kid that was in
Yeah.
trouble, or were you a good kid? Or go ahead, give us a beef.
I was a good kid. I grew up half Scottish, half Jamaican up in Canada. So I didn't not a lot of people look like me back then. So I had to fight a lot.
Okay.
My dad was Scottish and tough cat. My mom's Jamaican. But I played all the sports, but I had to fight in the streets everywhere I went. It was a hockey rink or the swimming pool. I always had to fight, but I loved to fight. So it was something that I never picked a fight, but I always let somebody, if they started with me, or I'd stand up for people. But I actually, it's really crazy. To this day, my son's got to stop me sometimes because I like to fight.
I'll tell you, I got to live in Vancouver for a couple of years, and Canada, and this was much later, obviously, but Canada still has this reputation of being like a melting pot and very peaceful, but there is an underground or an undertow of people that settle things with their fists. It's not like it's like, oh, you hit my kid, I'm gonna sue you or get a lawyer. No, you settle things on the street like that. Uh, so yeah, where in Canada did you grow up?
In Vancouver, British Columbia. So
Okay.
right outside of Vancouver, in a suburb called Quitlam, Port Moody area.
Okay.
And it was it was fights, man. Every Friday, Saturday night, it was fight after school. It would be hundreds of people sitting there watching you in a ravine square off with somebody. It was just that's what it was back in the day. It was it was older kids. The strong survived back then. That's what it was.
Yep. Yep. Now it's funny. So as you grew up, and you're a few years, I think we might be the same age. Were you born in 70?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're the same age. So by the time your MMA career starts, it's 97. So get us there first. So did you wrestle in college? Did you go to college?
I wrestled in grade 5. I had this German teacher that said, "Hey, anybody wants to wrestle? Come at 7 a.m. in the morning." This was grade 5, so I was like, okay. I played basketball, played all the sports. We wrestled. He taught us wrestling for a couple of years in elementary. When it hit junior high, I was like playing basketball and stuff like that, playing rugby, tennis, all those things. I didn't go into wrestling. Still fighting, but not going to wrestling. It wasn't, I don't know if it was just wasn't a great team, or I was just wanting to be a basketball player. I remember come grade 11, my brother said, "Dude, you're 5'8", man. You're never gonna play basketball." Go stop. Go back to wrestling. So I went back in grade 11, 12, wrestled, did really well, got in the top in the province, top 5. And then after that, after high school, there was really nothing. I was going to college. They had a wrestling club, but every time I went there, the doors were shut. So I was like, they weren't organized. And we've had some good wrestlers come from that area. So I was just like, oh, okay, well, I kind of just, what did I do? Graduated. Oh, yeah, that's what happened. I graduated college, and I was actually bodybuilding at the time.
Okay.
I kind of left wrestling for a bit, and then I got in a serious car accident that it actually wasn't even an accident. It was on purpose, but it changed my life. And like I know now, like sometimes bad things change for good, and it changed my life. Where the fact that I got into with a biker up here, and he was a racist dude or whatever, but he did something and came at me. I defended myself and I knocked him out. And then I remember like months later, I saw him on the highway. He chased me down the car. So I said, "Oh, this guy wants to get a beating again." I got out my car. He left, took off. Then when I was coming home from college and I was at a stop sign and I looked in my rearview mirror and I saw a one-time moving truck coming like about 60 miles an hour in my rearview mirror and smashed me into a wall, smashed me into a house, and kept on smashing my car. And that was the age of 1990, April 5th, it happened. That changed my life. I was partially paralyzed in my long thoracic nerve. I had serratus anterior palsy. And I think for 7 years, man, it was like insurance companies and all this kind of stuff. And it was just, it put my life on hold for 7 years. All I did was lift weights and try it again. I never could get the symmetrical back ever because I was paralyzed. And that's what put me back into fighting, actually.
Wow.
Was, you know, put me back into fighting and said, you know, I'm not going to be able to be a bodybuilder, man. You know, so then I've always, I think 88 was like some of the first movies that were filming up in Vancouver. So I've done a lot of movies over the years. And I was doing 21 Jump Street, the original one with Johnny Depp and them. And doing very well as a stuntman before the accident. So I started going back into that. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go down, get out of BC and go down to Seattle, Washington. And I'm going to do a conservatory. So it's a theater program and do theater. And I was ahead of the Fringe Festival of one of these plays, and I was looking for a gym. And I saw this one gym. I kept going to this Muay Thai gym, and nobody was ever there. So I remember seeing Maurice Smith up in Vancouver at one of the local fights, and he said, "Oh, go check out not Maurice, sorry, Song was a Thai guy." He said, "Go check out Maurice Smith down in Seattle." So I looked in the phone book and I saw Maurice Smith and Matt Hume. They were together at the time, but I was calling asking for Maurice, but they had just had their split up. I guess they were just splitting up. So I drove away to Kirkland and found Matt's gym, Haru Shimanashi and Matt Hume. And Haru became my Muay Thai coach. And I never met Matt right off the bat. And I started doing Muay Thai with Haru. And Haru was like, "You're tough, you're a pretty tough cat." Well, I fought in the street. I had no defense, but I had offense. And then there was a guy in there that nobody wanted to spar. And Matt kind of watched me over the time. And said, "You know, you should come to do some MMA." And I'm like, "No, I'm good with Muay Thai." Then they nobody wanted to spar this big guy. And I said, well, they asked me that night, and Haru goes, "Go in there and do what you do, man." And I said, "Okay." So I get in there and we're gonna do 5-minute rounds of shoot boxing. So kickboxing with takedowns. The guy's about 280. Well, we go at it. And the first thing, he comes out and jabs me. I slip and he catches me. I slip to the ground, and then I was pissed. I looked at my corner, Haru, and he's like, "Do what you do, man. Do what you do." So we went at it toe to toe for 5 rounds. I ended up breaking my collarbone, but you know what? I was pumped, and I'm like, at the end they go, "Do you know who he just fought?" I go, "Who?" He goes, "That's Chemo. He was already fighting the UFC."
Wow.
So I was like, "Oh man, if this guy, if I can do this here and he's making a living, maybe I can make a living at this." I said.
Okay, that's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Like with Haru, I'd always heard his name like as a legendary guy, and you know, if he trained Matt, then he's got to be good because Matt's one of those athletes that you know stood out to me. You know, even across time, even though we didn't get to see him compete a ton. You know, you're kind of lucky you fell in with good people, huh?
Really lucky, man. It was
Go ahead.
yeah. You know, it's obviously a higher being made them flukily come to the gym at the same time. Come with Haru. They were asking me over and over. I remember Matt. I said one time I did one of his classes, but I still wasn't really interested yet. And then they put me on. I think it was with, I'm not sure, one of the Lally brothers, or whatever. And I armbarred somebody, and they go, "Where'd you learn that?" I go, "Well, UFC those 3. I think Hoist Gracie. I watched a video." And then they were like, "Oh," and they kept on asking me. And then when that happened after chemo, I go, "Maybe I'll make a living at this." And that's when I changed.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Was Matt in the student role, or was he already in the teacher role by then?
He was in the teacher role by then.
All right. So I got to ask you because I've heard a lot about Matt and his initiation. So he's watching you for a little while.
Yeah.
But at some point, he's something. I'll tell you the story that Aaron Riley told me. He goes, he was up at the gym for a little while, doing, fighting Josh Barnett and Dennis and that generation of guys. And one day, Matt comes on after all the training is done, and Matt's putting on gloves. He said, "Come on, let's spar." And Matt was not nice. Matt took it to him. Aaron said to me, he goes, he beat me up for about an hour, and there's nothing I could do. Aaron said it was kind of like he actually shook Matt's hand and thanked him afterwards. He didn't even know how to react. So, what was your initiation like when you finally
Yeah,
realized this guy's a teacher for a reason?
similar but a little different. I was hungry for it. A little bit bigger than Matt too, I think at the time. But I remember the day it happened because Haru was like, it was me, Haru, and Matt. And I think a couple of the Lally brothers were there. And Matt goes, "Let's spar, man." I said, "Okay." I never knew there was any kind of, and I just thought I don't know much about, So I said, "Okay." So me and him sparred, and I think we did a freaking 20-minute round, and we were knocking the fans over. We were knocking everything over. We were wrestling off the mats. It was a war, dude. But he's vicious, man. He's vicious. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's so good and vicious. But I remember he was loving it because I just wouldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. I'd just keep coming. And we were knocking stuff over and it pushed us back on. And it was awesome.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the Lally brothers. They were twins and they were littler
Yeah.
guys, but they're also, stayed around the MMA game for a long time and, became trainers and very good people.
Yeah.
So from early on, when did the next generation of guys come in, like, the Josh Barnett's, Dennis Hallman, Anthony Hamlet, Jeff Munson? How did
So,
that come about?
so I think at that time when I was there was Chemo, there was Todd Bjornstein, there was Doug. I can't remember Doug's last name. There was a couple Japanese fighters, the Lallies. Then I remember Josh.
Bob Gilstrap, is that a familiar name?
Gilstrap was around. Yep, Gilstrap was at Maurice Gym, but
Okay.
not at our. And then I think I started seeing Josh and Ivan and Hallman start coming into the picture, and Jeff Munson.
Okay.
That's when I started. The next breed after I was there for a bit, they started coming in.
Okay. And when you were in Vancouver, did you ever run into, because actually one of the first Canadian guys that we saw was a Vancouver native named Jason Fairn.
Yeah.
And he had some, he's got some interesting, and some of those roughneck stories I know about, fighting in, the street and stuff like that had to do with Jason. He had a student named Lee Remedios that he's a Chinese kid that grew up in England, and Lee was over there in the early days, and Lee got into it with some Chinese kids and stuff like that, and they were going to meet to fight with, the cars surrounding and the light, and the lights of the cars and stuff, and his back was Jason Fairn. Was there ever a chance that you might fall in with Jason, or that just wasn't?
Well, kind of funny thing is, back then the gyms were it was like the Wild Wild West. Like when we first came into the martial art tournaments, everybody was wearing gi. So we were the first school to kind of wear shorts. So we were ostracized at first, and then things started evolving and things started changing. I remember Jason. I know Jason came to my gym later in the years, way after. But Jason, it was like when you have a gym back then, it was like all we watched was the Gracie tapes. So he's people would come in and challenge, and we would beat them up. We'd videotape it and we have so many VHS of things. Although I believe it's just crazy. That stuff wouldn't slide nowadays. But I remember my business partner, he was a local martial artist, Chris Franco, who fought in a couple of big stages as well. Him and Jason were kind of arch enemies, kind of. So it was, yeah. But it's just because it's Vancouver thing. So when, school versus school kind of thing. And Chris is a tough cat. So Jason kind of stayed away. He kind of stayed away from our school, but he had his little thing. And then Chris was my partner for my first 2 years of business. So we were partners, and we would travel and fight around. It was, like I say, the stuff we got away with back then, I don't know. There's no way. I mean, you get people they come walking in the gym, and we'd be like, okay, here you go. Here's some gloves or no gloves, and let's go. You
Yeah,
know,
no vetting, no nothing.
no, let's videotape it. We'd be teaching, and somebody come in there and want to challenge the instructor. We'll say, okay, class, sit around. There you go. And it was nuts. Yeah.
Now, what year did you get to the AMC? We'll call it AMC, even though maybe it wasn't quite that yet. But what was
Yeah.
that? You had to be there 95 by then
Yeah.
because you
AMC,
debuted in 97.
yeah. So I think it was AMC. I think it was like 96, I think, maybe around there.
Okay. Were you around Matt when he was actually Matt later fought in 2000 something on my show when you came to corner him. He did his last fight. But
Yeah.
in those days, he was prepared. He fought Pat Miletich. He fought Eric Paulson in some of the most advanced fights for that period that you're
Oh,
ever
yeah.
going to see. Were
Absolutely.
you with him preparing him for those fights?
No, I wasn't with him for that time. I think it was after. I think it was
Okay.
after I got there. Yeah.
Okay, and then so what about that first Abu Dhabi, which was in '98? That could be, and that's where Matt actually got hurt,
Yeah.
and then from there, that was sort of the end of his career. He took a bad knee injury to a Brazilian guy. What was your take on that? You know what was Matt's preparation like? Because I feel like we were robbed of Matt and like of a career because I would have liked to have seen it. I mean, the
Yeah.
fact is with Paulson. Um, Paulson was a Shudo champion. We'll talk about Masanori Suda with you too.
Yeah.
But Paulson is an elite guy and an
Yeah.
elite and like Matt, a mastermind kind of guy.
Yeah.
And Matt, when it came down to it, they had a proven ground. Matt was
He
better.
handled it.
The same thing with Miletich. That day
Yeah.
he handled Miletich pretty easily. The guy was UFC champion, so I do think we were robbed. What was your
Yeah.
impression of that, and talk about Matt in those early days when he was thinking about competing?
Oh, Matt that was the only thing that held him back was the injuries, and I think that was right after Abu Dhabi. And you just remind me of that. I remember prepping for that and going to Abu Dhabi with him and competing, and it was those soft mats. I'm not sure it was how he got caught, but those mats that first year, it was kind of catered towards jiu-jitsu guys. They didn't want the wrestlers to shoot quick, so it was like you're on a pillow.
Okay,
So it was dangerous for your knee. The mats are really, really cushiony and soft. Never even been on mats like that before. It's like a canvas cover with like a pillow underneath. So it's like you couldn't shoot fast. And I think that's where how he injured his knee in there. I think he got stuck or something, or I'm not quite sure, remember. But we prepared pretty tough for that one. I think it was me. Who else went with me? I think
the Lollies.
The Lollies were there.
Did you compete?
Yeah, I competed in was it 205 division, I believe.
Okay.
I got to the finals. I beat Hobbin Gracie. Then I fought Ricardo Amedia to a draw. And I don't know how he got to go forward. It was like a lot of Henzo was yelling and Matt was yelling, and then they raised his hand, but it was a draw and I was on top. So I don't know, man. I don't know how that works, but he ended up going on to the finals and fighting Marius Sperry. But it was a great experience.
Yeah, I'm jealous because I went to all the Abu Dhabis in Abu Dhabi except for the first one.
Yeah.
And so like that first one is like the mysterious thing because how did that come about? Do you remember Matt getting the phone call telling you we're going to Abu Dhabi? Because that was one that even people like myself that were kind of into the sport, we sort of heard about that after it happened. It was almost like a private show, that first one.
Yeah,
how would you describe it?
Yeah, it was. It was really almost like it almost felt like a blood sport kind of thing. It was like the movie. It was like, Matt, we got so many spots. We're gonna fight it out in the gym for it, and whoever wins gets to go. I remember I don't know if I thought I was going already or and then at the last minute they threw Ivan against me, Ivan Salaberry.
Sure.
And I'm going, man. Nobody's stopping me from going this spot. And I guess I won that day. And so I got the chance to go. And it was when you got there, you just got off the plane, you see Oleg Taktarov and Mario Sperry and all these different guys from around the world. It was John Lewis, and it was awesome, man. It was
Yeah, and
awesome.
even then they did a pretty good job. Like they sort of filled it in with some Arab talent, which was a little bit below at that point.
Yeah,
Even Guy Nevens competed, who was one of the organizer guys.
yeah.
But you're right. You know, Henzo Gracie. They had. I remember one of the guys that finished high up. I'll forget his name, but he was like a judoka from Italy, like a guy that didn't do
Oh,
MMA. He
right.
was a pure Italian judo guy, and good stuff, great stuff. Now, how was the uh like after fight parties and stuff? Because I saw a brief video of Sperry getting given like a big gold knife, like a big honorary gold knife and stuff. And I've also heard that they spent more money on the first one than they did on any of the others, and I saw some money being spent in future
Oh,
years. So, what was that treatment like?
well, it was awesome treatment. I mean, beautiful hotel where we were at. Um, I remember all I remember is the 50-50 tickets, and they were giving the winners were getting Rolexes and Range Rovers and stuff. You know what I'm saying? It's like, wow, there's not even that many people. There's a lot of shakes in the crowd, but not a many. It was just like a private showing, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And I never went off to Dubai with everybody else. I should have, but I never did. I think I wanted to be back for the next day or something. But it was like one nightclub and was all the guys in there pretty much. I saw Tatarov, he was having a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was hard, and a couple other guys were partying hard. We didn't party that hard. We just kind of lounged, but it was an interesting them. And I remember the stories after. I was supposed to go back and teach because they brought Matt back to teach there, and he was telling me about the stories like the gym with the gold door handles and like solid gold door handles, and they'll be out in the desert and they just pop up tents and they'll be cook something and they'll go racing the horses, and it was just he was telling me all kind of stories about it, and it's just unbelievable, man.
Now I'll ask you: did you ever roll with the Sheik?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Okay,
I never got.
because you know, you obviously, you know, it was his love for the sport and him growing up, you know, or going to college in California rather, where you know, but he was also a guy different than a lot of the sponsors, where he also hit the mats too and liked to roll with the guys. Did you see him rolling with other people? Because Matt probably had that treat.
So Matt, I know Matt was teaching him for a while, and then I remember his original long teacher that he went to university with. What a story that is, you know. And it's I never got to see him grapple. Got a couple pictures with him. Very nice. He had after my fight with Media, he actually said, "Did you win?" I said, "No, I lost." Man. He's like looked at me like that, and it was like either he was a nice guy. He was a nice guy, but I never got a chance to go over there and teach or anything. I
Yeah,
was supposed to.
I'll tell you a brief story. It's about you, not me. But in '99, I went over and I had sent them a portfolio of hook and shoot guys, and they took one guy, Travis Fulton, if you remember the name.
Yeah, yeah.
And they probably took him based on his MMA career. And I went over as a reporter with a camera, and he did a press conference, and all the Japanese press was there, and everybody was there. And I didn't ask any questions after the show. He was after the interview. He was kind of taking pictures, and he was, you know, posing for the pictures. And I was off to the side, and I said to him, you know, I think we could do your rules in our show in Indiana. And I knew we had watched our videotapes and stuff. I'd already
Yeah.
been mailing them. And the only words he ever said to me was, "I will help you." and that is actually the inception of the trials. That we did the first
Wow.
trials ever in the United States. Um,
Yeah.
and very funny, another quick one. Um, later on, after, because we taped our own show, we did our own show, and in 1998 they had taped the show and everything, and the videos didn't come out. Why? Because the only people who knew the fighters, the camera guys, didn't know anybody. The only people who knew the fighters were the VIPs, the Sheik, and he's not going to sit and be like, "That's Lance, that's it," you know. So they had no time. So those took ages to come out, and they asked me to videotape them. And
Wow.
I was like, "Oh my god!" So yeah, I think, you know, we tape our own show, but you guys, you do 3 fights at a time and stuff. He's like, "What do you need?" So I sent him, you know, we need more cameras, we need more of this and that, and I need 30 people there and this. And I was at work, and my wife calls me 3 days later, and she goes, "There's a check for $60,000 here." so
Crazy.
so for sure, what you're saying about, that it was a taste of the big time, and meeting people that are a different level usually, if for sure felt that way, and
Right.
there was that air, that feeling of awe that was there.
Yeah, that's
So
cool, man.
now let me ask you, at the same time where Matt's doing, he comes from a kickboxing background. Obviously, Haru is a legendary MMA type of figure. Maurice, his original partner, also a kickboxing guy. At some point, Matt also spent time in Pancrase in Japan. Well, what can you tell us about those years, and what how he incorporated that technique? Because I think that Matt's like a sponge that was kind of mixing everything from the very early days. Were you
Yeah, I
exposed to Pancrase, and how come also you never fought there?
no, I never fought there because it was that time was there a little bit after mine.
Okay.
Let me before, sorry, a little bit before, and Matt had already fought there, but he had already got all that knowledge there, man. And he like he did, like you said, he incorporated it into the AMC Pancration. Everything that he got over there and learned that it was that's why him and our team was so much ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the ankles. Like nobody knew ankles back then, but Matt.
Yeah. And that's also kind of what you mentioned was one of your signature things. That's where, you give up the gi, and stuff like that. It just becomes, something that's not necessary in Pancrase and stuff. So definitely you were at the kind of ground zero in the United States for this stuff. So
Yeah,
let's take this over to your debut. So Matt has taken over guys like you mentioned, Todd Bjornthon. There were a few guys that went to TJ's Super Brawl show, and then I believe you, was it Super Bowl three that you debuted, or Super Bowl four? In four, you're in a tournament. So you
four
go down
was
to
my
the tournament. So describe that show and that feeling to us. And obviously, this is what the internet says is your first fight. Was that your first fight, legitimately, or?
yeah, first pro fight, man. I went in front of like I don't know thousands of people in the Blaisdell Arena who wanted to kill me, and I was fighting their six-time future world champion Peter Matatia, 280-pounder. I was like 199 with I probably weighed on with my boots on and my clothes, but I wanted to go over. I was actually supposed to be middleweight, but they wouldn't. I asked Matt, and they said they wouldn't pay for my ticket unless I went in the heavyweight tournament. So I said, "Well, I'll go heavyweight because they didn't want to pay for my ticket to go in the middleweight." So I said, "Okay." So I went to heavyweight, and that's she's super heavyweight. But it was a different mindset back then. It was just like I watched the tapes. I watched the Valley Cados in Brazil. I wanted to fight Bernard. I wanted to fight anybody, and I wanted out be in the outdoor. I didn't care. Like it was no fear. I just wanted to do it. I wanted to fight. So it was like okay. And I remember going over there, and Haru. He was already. I think I'm not sure if Haru was already moved there. He might have already moved from Washington and was living in Hawaii. Yeah, because when I first got in, I go, "Hey, Haru," I said, "What do you know about my opponent?" He goes, "I just watched him fight last weekend." And I go, "Oh, yeah." And he goes, "Yeah, he knocked the guy right out cold." He goes, I said, "Oh, what do you want me to do?" He goes, "Don't get hit."
That's good advice, actually.
All right. Oh, okay, Haru, what the hell? And so it was just, it's just, there's no thought. We just trained how we knew how to train. There wasn't really a protocol to train in. So it was like, you get up, I do bag work with little gloves on for 30 minutes. It's just, that's what you did,
Mhm.
and you would just have multiple partners and you'd go for 30 minutes and it was nothing.
Yep.
And I remember going over there and getting him and realizing I didn't have anything. I just, it was just a big Samoan cat. Just knocked everybody out. And I just said, okay. So I came out and Haru was like, "You're Mike," he always say, "You're Mike Tyson. You're Mike Tyson. That's what you do. That's what you do." I'm like, okay. So I'm going to move and hit, move and hit. And I remember coming out, hitting him. I remember him hitting me and knocking me halfway across the cage. I'm like, oh shit, he's right. Don't get hit. So I think we actually clinched up, and I locked him up, and then he kind of went down for a single on me, and I actually took it back and choked him out. And I was like, okay, this is it, man. This is great.
Yeah, that was always kind of the bugaboo with the Hawaiian guys, was they were big hitters. They had, they liked to slug it out, but the groundwork was always going to be their weak spot. So you got through
Yeah.
there. Now, in the second fight that day, you kind of go into a rivalry fight. Would it be called a rivalry because you fought Gilstrap, who you said was like a Maurice Smith
Yeah.
student after Maurice had broken up, and Gilstrap, people may remember, made a UFC appearance later and was touted as a Maurice Smith student. How did that fight feel? Did you know him before? Was it?
So what?
Was
That was a
it
big learning lesson. You're right. It was a big learning lesson because um, I didn't even like all I thought about was my biggest fight. Oh, I beat this big guy already. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm fighting again. Okay, I'm fighting Girl Step, no problem. I flew over with him, sat beside him the whole time, talked, and didn't. And if you watch the fight, I dominate the first 7 minutes, but I'm not being vicious. I'm not being mean, and that's where I learned. And I remember I was kind of just playing with them, and not trying to actually hurt him. And then we went. I don't know if I fell back for an ankle, and he freaking heel kicked me and caught me hard. He tried to hurt me,
yeah,
and caught me, and I was like, "Lesson learned, man. Lesson learned." He won the tournament, and I was like, "Damn, everything happens for a reason in life. That will never happen to me again, ever." I said to myself, "I'm just like, I had the ability to finish it, and I didn't because I was just had this kind of friendship with him, and he taught me a lesson that night, and he went on to win and he moved on to the UFC, and I had a totally different path, which brought me to the UFC later too as well.
yeah. Now, did you get to watch the whole show?
Yeah,
Because there was another Northwest guy up there, another guy with a kickboxing background that showed up at the show. And to me, still, it's one of the most amazing and great knockouts of the era. And that's Danny Bennett.
Danny boy.
What can you tell us about that fight? Because he fought J.R. Palmer, who they had built up as a huge star down there. And
Yeah.
Bennett took him out with a head kick that got heard around the world. what was
Oh,
what was the atmosphere like? What was everything like that about around that fight?
it was Danny's a great guy. He hung out with us I think a couple times there, but he was a calm, cool cat. He was, man. He had the inner confidence. He kind of knew that what he was going to do. And JR is so rangy and tough and unorthodox that he just waited, but he just waited for him to drop those hands when he does, keeps him by his waist, and then poof, popped and knocked him out. It was electric. Did they fight twice?
Yeah, they fought twice. He did it again to him.
Yes, yes.
I've gotten to interview Danny, so
Oh,
for sure, what you say about a guy that exudes that confidence, for
mm-hmm.
sure he has that quiet man's confidence for sure.
Yeah,
Very impressive guy. Too bad we didn't get to see much more of him in MMA. But I think Muay Thai was his bread and butter anyway. You
yeah,
know
it
what I
was.
mean? So, how did you said you watched videos heading, into that fight and stuff. So what was your mindset? Because training in the gym, even with you know elite guys, ruthless guys, and guys like that, what did it feel like when you saw J.R. Palmer foot stomp that Brazilian guy, in the head and knock him out and keep foot stomping him? You know what I mean? Did what did that make you think? Did you think, obviously you're going to think, oh, this is very serious shit that I'm about to get into, but did that motivate you? Did that make you feel like it something that you still wanted to do? Because that would probably back some people off, especially now with all the rules and stuff and people used to the rules. When they see that, that's about as raw as you're going to see.
I loved it because I fought in the street so much, and that's what I used to do in the street. So it was like what I was in the street was a lot more dangerous than I was in the cage. So it was like we just loved it. It was like me and our team up in Canada. I started a gym with Franco. It was just like we would watch videos and then we'd mimic them. You
Yeah.
know, we'd
Yeah.
watch Hicks and Gracie on Choke, and we mimicked those. We were doing ice bath way back then, like he was, but and he was doing all those animal movements that are so called new now. He was ahead of the game. And then we were watching all the Valley Tudos. I remember at that time I was emailing people, like I'm emailing Valley Tudos saying I want to fight Walter Ismail. I'm a kid from Canada and I want to fight him on your event. I remember after fighting Severin later on, Pride got a hold of me. I was talking to the guy from Pride at that time. That's how small this kind of thing was.
Yeah, for sure. Now, did you while you're a video fan, did you ever see the Absolutes in Russia?
Oh yeah, we did.
because Ricardo Morayo was in Abu Dhabi, won one of those tournaments, and those were also crazy shows that people don't
Yeah.
remember. But the less rules, there are guys like you too. There are a lot of guys out there from those times where that's what attracted to him, the less rules. And I usually say, Lance, an amazing MMA fighter, but he's probably even better in the street. He's a guy you want on your side in a street fight for sure. So definitely interesting. You come back for the next Super Bowl, so now you're into the rotation, and at this point, to be honest with you, Super Bowl had a brief moment in time, but a moment where they were the biggest show on the planet. The UFC was in war memorials in Alabama, and they were
Mm-hmm.
filling up the Blaisdell Arena and bringing in
Mm-hmm.
guys like yourself, Matt Hume students. Jerry Bolander, Pete Williams. They had Ken Shamrock students debuting. For example, Vitor Belfort made his debut there. So they were one of the first international shows. Talk about Super Bowl V and going back there and being in that rotation.
So that time, I think it was the first time I was in Guam. I'm not sure. Maybe it wasn't the first time, but it was in Guam. They got a call for I think Doug had already fought Severn. I'm not quite sure from there, and he got beat. And then
who was it?
I think Doug from AMC had fought Severn.
Okay, I'm gonna look it up for you while we're talking here because we're looking for Doug's last name too.
Doug Murphy.
Okay, that sounds right. Yep.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he fought him before or after, but they Matt had offered me. He called me up and said, "Oh, we got a fight with Severn." And I said, "Okay, cool. 30-minute round in Guam." I said, "Let's do it." And I remember training for that fight. I did a lot of that training I did in Seattle, but a lot of the training I did up in Vancouver as well. And I had Chris, Chris Franco was my business partner, and he was a tough cat, and he mimicked Severn for me and got a bunch of wrestlers to come in and mimic him. But it was just, I think it was more mentality than skill. It was just I had a tough mentality. I just wanted to fight. I wanted to get in there. Just, it was just like you just wanted to go there and fight, and you wanted a long, grueling, hard fight. You didn't even think about the quick knockouts. You just wanted, you're watching the Vanderleys back then, and Pele and all those guys, and that's what I'm watching these tapes. I'm like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now let's just put this into perspective for people. Talk about something that you'll never see again, right? So you go to Guam, you go to fight Dan Severn, and you only lasted in the first round. He beat you in the first round, but it was 26 minutes in. Talk about that fight, because at this point Severn had fought Doug Murphy. He was also already a UFC champion and stuff like that. So this was definitely, he would have been favored. And to go 26 minutes with him is a feather in your cap any way you slice it. Also, the other part is Dan became a little bit of a showman later in MMA, going to the town, beating the local guys and stuff. But you got a serious version of Dan Severn back then. This was Dan still taking it seriously. So what do you remember about that fight and what Dan felt the whole thing?
Yeah, I remember I figured, I knew they brought me in to lose. I'm fighting Denton, the UFC champion. I've had this is my second really professional fight, really. Mm-hmm. Second fight all in the cage ever, full ring. Because I fought the tournament, so that was 2 in one night. And then this is pretty much my second time fighting. But I remember getting there and being so ready to fight that I was like, my mindset was like I was levitating. It was like there was nothing could stop me. And I remember going in there and seeing him across the cage. Didn't fear him. I knew he was going to shoot me. That's not going to stop me. You're going to have to kill me. And I just went in there and just fought my ass off. And I remember catching him with the head kick, almost knocked him out. I broke his nose with that, and I beat up his legs continuous through the fight. Any chance I got back to my feet, I just kept beating up his legs and throwing high kicks and catching him with punches. And it was like, I remember him, he didn't expect it. And even at the end of the fight, he told me, he was like, holy shit, Jesus. And so it wasn't expected. So it was a great fight.
Yeah, and he probably had, 50 pounds on you?
Oh, yeah, easy. Yeah.
Yeah, so for sure, he must have also been told it'll be an easy night kind of thing. This guy's only got 2 fights. and he was confident in himself. So, but very interesting. 26 minutes, 22 seconds in. What do you remember? How did he finish you?
I think it was like a key lock paintbrush, and I if I would have known there was that much time left, I probably wouldn't. I probably because I don't even know if I even tapped. I looked at the tape, but I think the ref kind of came in. It was like either break it or I'm going to tap or whatnot. But I was exhausted. I was exhausted. If all I needed to know was there's 3 minutes left, but it was like I know it was a 30-minute round, but this feels like an hour, dude. Like, when is this gonna end? So I was like, I get back to my feet one more time, and then he ended up. I think it was a key lock, I believe, but he got up and then. But I found I didn't even think it was a loss. It was just the war to be there and the experience. But I think that's what gave me my card, my get out of jail card for Japan and to move forward. They kind of got behind me, a little guy versus a big guy, and I kind of got my push after that fight. So it was really good.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, fighting a guy that was already known and you're still a relative unknown, 26 minutes, I don't think anybody expected. And then the promoter must have thought, he got his money's worth. Now, let me ask you this. What did old TJ pay you?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what I got paid back then. TJ was always pretty good with me, but I can't even remember what I got paid for that fight.
But it wasn't $80,000 or anything like that.
No,
Probably a couple thousand, maybe.
probably.
Okay.
I don't even remember. I probably back then I would have done it for free, but it was like it wasn't much because I don't even think how much it would have been, but it wasn't much. But at that time, I didn't even care. At that point, it was just like I got to a place where I've never been before in my life in Guam. It was freaking paradise. Yeah. I can go back to that day now, and people still know me from that fight, and I still keep in touch with tons of people. But yeah, it wasn't definitely a lot of money.
Yeah, Guam is one of those places too that it has a spot in the early MMA history. I don't know if you followed, Kid Yamamoto and
yeah,
and Manasubian. What's his Melchior?
Yeah.
Melchior. He's from Guam.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know this. Yamamoto.
Yeah.
Yamamoto died in Melchior's arms.
Oh, his arms.
Yeah, they were. He was taking care of him. Yamamoto had not. He was not. Reconciled with his family yet, and he passed away in Guam. That's my understanding of it. That the Guam people were taking care of him. So there was definitely a fight culture and a high level one there as well. Melchior finished, I think, fourth in Abu Dhabi one year. Took home some money if you get into the fourth spot. So for sure.
Yeah.
Is that when you met those guys? Is that how the hookup came up there?
Well, the funny thing is I've had relationships with Rich Chews ever since then. Rich Chews, that's where I met him.
Okay.
So it was Melkor, Credo, John Kelvo, Rich Chew back in those days. And I stayed in touch with all those people. And it's so weird how it comes around where my wife, I'm dealing with Rich Chew when my wife was Julia Budd became the Bellator world champion and 4-time world champion. That's who I was negotiating my contract with, Rich Chew. And then my son negotiated with Rich Chew. So it's like I met all these guys back in Guam.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a small world. Well, once you get into it, it's a small world where you remember people, come up with people. It's like, you could talk to a million people about Melkor. I've seen him compete, so it's like, it's a small world. It's definitely very interesting. That's why I love catching up with guys like yourself from that era, because I feel like the stories need to be told, and you're being very open and honest. I get the feeling that you're not telling these stories every day. You know what I mean? That we're bringing up old stuff.
Yeah, it's lost history, man. I tell you, it's history that needs to be told, right?
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And if not, it gets lost, and that would be a shame. So let's go back here. You next come back to Super Brawl, and now they're still sticking you into this heavyweight stuff. Oh, yeah. You fight Rocky Battistini, who I also I know who he is. He competed for me, and he also competed in Abu Dhabi in later years. Also one of those rugged guys, and also a guy probably had you by 50 pounds. To talk about that fight.
Now, learning lesson. This was one of the key parts of my career. This fight. I was supposed to fight Tank Abbott. Actually, I had to actually have the poster, and I was supposed to fight Tank Abbott. So I was preparing for him, getting ready for him, and then Dana at the time somebody stopped the fight from happening. I'm not sure if it was Dana or somebody else.
Or somebody in the UFC, or
Yeah,
Davey or somebody. Yeah.
yeah, or Dana maybe. And they had stopped the fight just before, so they threw in Rocky at the last minute. I'm like, well, yeah, I don't fear anything. I just fought Severn. I don't really fear much. So I'm like, okay. And so they brought this kid, he's a big dude. And I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't mean I'm still not processing it properly. All I do is remember is he had a baseball and a baseball glove in his warm-up room. He was doing this. So I'm like, oh, that's strange. I'm like, okay. So then coming out to the cage, I'm still living in the past of my Severn thing. I'm not taking this guy serious because it's not Tank Abbott. I've already done this to Dan Severn, and I remember coming out, and I remember being kind of foggy and get those nights, when you get those fights, and you're not fully on mentally. And I'm sitting there, and I see him across the cage, and he's really jittery, and I'm pretty relaxed, and the crowd knows who I am. I'm gonna do my thing. I come out really relaxed, and he runs across like a freight train and push kicks me into the ropes. I'm like, whoa! I kind of fell back into the ropes. My arms got kind of caught in the ropes. And I kind of embarrassed, kind of laughed. As I went to get up, boom, running knee, knocked me out. And I was like, I woke up and I saw them raising his hand, and I went after him. And then they go, no, Lance, you got knocked out. I go, but I did? What? Are you kidding me? That was the first time I've ever been knocked out. I'm going, oh my God. And then it's how I took the loss after was, I remember I go, that's life. What do you do? I'm not going to dwell on this. I remember the next day I grappled with Ensign anyway for like 30 minutes. We went out to the club the night after and had a great time. And I remember my partner saying, Chris Franco, business partner, saying to me, dude, I've never seen anybody take a loss like that before. And I'm like, you know what, dude? I beat myself. I didn't take him. I wasn't paying attention. I beat myself. That's my mistake. I'm not going to dwell on this. I'm going to get better. And this is what it is. And also, that was when I realized, dude, I'm fighting these guys who are 60 pounds heavier than me. I gotta go down, man. I gotta go down in weight. And that's where I made my decision to go down in weight.
Yeah. Now, because that's one of those things where you get hit by a knee, by anybody, you could get knocked out. But get hit by a knee by a guy 60 pounds bigger than you, and those chances go up. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So this is very interesting. This is knowledge not even I knew. So your original opponent was Tank Abbott, another UFC kind of legend kind of thing. What's your mindset preparing for a guy like that? Also a guy that had that street reputation. I also, I was attending UFCs and stuff, and Tank was no joke in terms of when they say he was a bad boy. He was a bad boy. I saw him start fights with Vitor Belfort in the backstage areas, and we had the running with Alan Goes and things like that. How do you prepare for a guy that is so unpredictable and stuff? Embrace it, or were you worried? Talk about taking that fight.
See, I was like, okay, I did this to Severn. I can do this to this guy. I got to stay away from his hands for the first couple minutes. But we're in a small ring though. That's the difference between a cage. Mm-hmm. So now small ring. So I'm like, I got to work my angles. I got to be quick to hit him, and then I got to tie him up. I don't care if I go to my back. I got to tie him up and tire him out because I see how he would gas later on in the fight. Sure. After the 3-minute mark, right? So I didn't fear it, but there was a sense of, okay, this is, don't be on the end of those punches, and you got to move. And after fighting Peter Matatia in the first Super Brawl, pretty similar guys, very similar. So and they both punch and power, and they both. So I was aware, but I wasn't. I just like I craved it. I was pretty upset when he got taken out. Like, that's who I wanted to fight,
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's another opportunity because when you're fighting names like that, that gets you elevated real quick. You know what I mean? So next up, you're in, and now you had mentioned you were already getting noticed by the Japanese talent agents and people like that because you're showing with Severn, and you're fighting big guys, the small guy versus the big guy, and like you mentioned, you're a stocky, powerful dude, but you're also 5'8", so it's noticeable against some of these guys. But then it looks like you went back into the lower weight class, and they gave you, no joke, Akihiro Gono.
Yeah.
What was Gono like? Because this is, again, he's a pancrase guy. I think Gono is still competing now,
Yeah, I know.
in his 50-year-old. So this guy was already a lifer, and a guy who was, you know, I, either as professional as you or more of a professional
Yeah,
fighter than you were and stuff like that. So this is the guy that you maybe had to take more seriously than any of the other guys. What was your thoughts on this?
yeah, absolutely. I know one of the teammates, Todd Bjornthien, had fought him and lost to him. And Matt, I remember I went boom, straight diet. I dieted down and I said I got to fight at a lighter weight now. It's the guys are getting too big, so started focusing on that. Took that really seriously and got in the best shape of my life. The best shape for that fight was one of the best shapes of my life. And I remember there's a lot of people doubting me because they were looking they were looking at my losses now. And I'm like, well, look who I fought, but nobody take that as, oh, he's losing. This is, if he loses again, I remember hearing that if he loses this fight, it's over. His career's over and this and that. And I'm like, nobody tells me that stuff. I remember, and it was some of the people that supported me too. And I was kind of like, okay. Guys don't believe in me. You think I'm over? I'm not over. This is the return. And I remember coming out, and I think it was Monty Cox and TJ saw me when I took my shirt off, and they go, "Holy shit, dude, you've been taking it seriously." I go, "Oh, this is it. This is it, man. This is where I'm supposed to be." And I was just I studied his fights, and I studied the way Japanese fighters fight, and I thought I think I had the recipe to beat them. They're very technical. They're tough. They can take good shots, but I bring the streets in. I bring in a little bit of more meanness in the streets with like polished technique, but mean and gritty and street. And that's
Yeah.
how you beat.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mind game too, where it's like, it, they don't, even back then, I would characterize them as, they're not in there to beat you in 10 or 15 seconds. They're in there to feel like to compete a little bit. And if you're like, oh, well, I'm here to kill you, I'm not here to
Yeah,
compete, that seems to
yeah,
get into their head a little bit. Was that
it
kind
does
of the mindset?
exactly. And it's to rough him up. And it's like I roughed him up. I shouldered his, bloodied his nose up. I stomped his feet. I just roughed him up, and I knew that would take him off. And any traditional martial art guy has never been in a street fight. You got those guys that never been in a street fight as well, and they're kickboxers and they're judo guys, and they've never had that happen to them,
Mm-hmm.
And they're great. They're great technique in this, but when you rough them up and do something a little bit, it's not dirty. It's just roughing them up.
Yeah.
It takes mindset from them.
Yeah.
And I remember breaking them. I remember breaking them in that fight, and that's when I knew I had it. And I remember him staring me down before at the weigh-ins, and he was trying to me mug me. I'm like, oh, dude, that's the worst thing you can do, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're just gonna make me even madder now. That's cool.
Yeah,
I
and
remember that.
you have an advantage too, because it's unlikely that he got into any street fights in Japan, really. You know what I mean? So for sure, you played the right card there in that one. And Gono is an all-time name too. So that win, if you're not getting credit for it, you deserve it, because it's still early in your career, and it's against a major name. Now,
Yeah,
shortly after that, now you get that first call to the UFC. And you fight a guy who I know pretty well because he fought for us in the Midwest, and that's Jermaine Andre. Now, Jermaine was also a pretty serious kickboxer, type stand-up fighter. I maybe not, but likely a roid user, like a really ripped, powerful dude. And back then they weren't doing too much, checking on stuff like that. But you're in your weight class, and like you said, if you're going to bring a rugged game to a fight with Lance Gibson, you're on your own, kind of thing. Was that what you felt in this fight? How did this fight feel? Because he's a guy who would try to, out tough you as well. So, and you took a big win here, and you won your UFC debut. So talk about what you remember this fight.
So I remember They offered me Vladimir Medichenko actually,
Ooh.
and that's who I trained for. So I was like, that was a tall glass, to deal with. But I was like, again, I just didn't have any fear back then. I just craved it. So I'm like, sure, but I'm training for this tough Russian wrestler striker, and I'm like, okay. And then all of a sudden, I think it was 2 weeks or a weekend before, Matt goes, they changed your opponent. Now it's a guy, a Muay Thai fighter. I'm like, oh, boy, totally changed game plan, right? But I said, okay, this is UFC. Let's just do it. We go on there. I watched a couple of his fights and saw, and I was just like, I learned a lot from this fight too, because I don't know. Sometimes I take the hard road, and I think, okay, I can do it all. I probably could have went out and just took him down and held him and probably choked him out. But I wanted to beat him at his own game. So I kind of like, and my son kind of does it too. And I tell him don't do it, but he kind of does it too. He kind of likes come out, because if I start beating you or testing you at your own game, then you're going to fall into your weakness, where I'm going to just do whatever I can. I feel like I like to take their soul. I like to just come out there and take them at their strength, and then I can do whatever I want. So I didn't go for the shot right off the bat with him. I came out and struck with him, and it was going great. And my clinch, I knew my clinch work could work with him. And Matt Hume has the push knees and not the traditional Muay Thai knees, so it screws up Thai fighters a lot. And I was reining in knees. I felt comfortable. He had that strong explosive strength, and it's hard to submit guys like that right off the bat, and but I played it a little bit more, and I actually went into the fight with a lower back problem. I didn't throw any kicks, and that's where when I did get caught. I remember Matt saying drop the 10, and I dropped a low kick, and I stood straight up, and that's when you can see he caught me with a 3-punch combination, but I think the second punch came across my retina, and then from that Battistini fight, I said I will never. You can't say that, but I said, if I ever get dropped or knocked out, I'm going to roll to my guard. I'm going to tie him up like the Gracies did. That's what, in my head, I'm thinking, I actually mentally trained that numerous times ever since that loss. And when he did catch me at the last, I think, 30 seconds of the round, I won the first part of it. I rolled, and thank God John McCarthy was the ref. That's all I say. That could have changed my whole destiny. Because if he would have jumped in and tried to stop the fight, then where would I be? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. He let it keep going. I rolled. Boom. The round ended. And I was like, well, it wasn't supposed to go like that. I get back to the corner, and I'm seeing 3. And I go, Matt, I see 3 people. And he goes, hit the guy in the middle. So I'm like, okay. So then I closed my eye, and you can see me fighting like that. But my son was like, I think he's 2 years old. So he's born in 95. He's at home watching with my mom and my dad. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to lose a fight with my son watching me on TV. It's not going to happen. So I continued to weather the storm. And I remember getting his back. I get him down. I'm reading about it. And I remember going I should have took his back. I went for a rolling armbar. And I remember popping the armbar, and I see his arm come up, and he tapped my leg, but I wasn't mean. I let go of it. And he rolled out of it. And I go, another lesson, man. Break it. What are you doing? So as time goes on, I wore him out, up against the cage in the clinch. A couple big punches from him, but I just kept putting him against the cage. I remember Militech trying to tell him, get off the cage, but he didn't know how to get off. I kept him on the cage, stomping his feet. And then I saw my opening. I kept on kneeing low. And then I brought my knee up to the head, and that's when I got the knockout.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, it actually was the Gono fight. I should have asked you, but now the UFC too. You went for doing 26 straight minutes, a 30-minute round with Severn, and now they start putting in the 5-minute rounds. Was that something that you embraced? You liked it? Didn't like it? If you had a fight now, in a mystical world, which rules would you prefer?
30-minute, no time limit. It's chess. I love it. It's a different breed. The training for a 5-minute fight is a sprint. It's different. There's different things. I really like the no time limits. I like the no time limit. Like Hoist had it right. When you can fight for an hour, you fight for an hour. Whoever's going to quit, But 30 minutes was great. It's just more chess.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, the stand-ups, it's like a forced stand-up. Even if the ref doesn't stand you up, you do got to start all over again, kind of thing. Where it's like, you know, you do lose position. I think that was a major. That's one of the major differences between NHB and the MMA. You know that
Yeah,
we see today is that the rounds and the addition of the rounds. And you're a man who was there for the transition and doing it at the highest level. Now UFC, Jermaine Andre, like I said, a hell of an athlete. Maybe um, you know, lost some focus you know, on his personal life and stuff like that. Didn't explode, but he had some potential too. He was
yeah.
quite an athlete that could definitely have done some things, and you put a stop to him in the UFC. So from there with the UFC now, you go to Japan. Is this your first time in Japan? Because you go to Japan and you fight Masanori Suda in something called Shudo Ri. This is July of 2000. You win a majority decision against a Japanese guy in Japan. There's got to be some stories behind this fight.
No. Yeah. So they brought me over. Well, there was talk in between. So at that point, after beating Gono, there was talk on me. Yeah, I guess some backstories on this you will never believe. But they got some talk on me for fighting Eric Paulson for the title. And I said, okay, cool. Let's do this. I started watching all his tapes. Matt's already fought him. I'm ready to go. And then he retired. So the fight was on and then was off. Then he retired. So I said, okay. And then there was talk about me fighting Larry Papadopoulos.
Okay, the Australian.
Yeah. And then somebody said, I don't know if it's true or not, said he wouldn't take the fight. So I go, okay. So then it was supposed to be, then this is an interesting fact that nobody knows about. I get a call from Carlos Newton was in the division. And he visiting Vancouver, and he wanted to come and see, he wanted to come up and visit me. I don't know him. I'm a fan of him, but he's in my division, and he came up to see me. But Matt gave me a heads up. So Matt goes, what he likes to do is he did the Larry Papadopoulos. He thinks he's like a Ronin, Miyamoto Masashi. I follow that thing.
Sure.
Is philosophy as well, but he likes to go visit his opponents ahead of time that he's gonna fight and befriend them, and then do something. But Matt kind of gave me the heads up already before. He said he did the Larry Papadopoulos. So when he came to me, I'm already aware of what he's going to do. So he came out, but I'm still a fan of him. He's a Canadian guy. He's on a different coast, and he came out to visit me. So he came to my gym that night, and we were going to take him out the club or whatnot. And he was looking at all my stuff on the wall, and I think I might have been doing a movie or something. So my students, Ryan Diaz and Chris Franco, were there with him. And he was going, oh, you know, there's a thing saying I was fighting for the title, and he was saying, oh, how could he fight for the title if I'm ranked ahead of him? And he started playing kind of some of the games in my gym when I weren't there. So they kind of called me on the phone and said, hey, dude's kind of not really here for the right reasons. I'm like, oh, okay, no worries. I've been already told ahead of time, but I'm not going to be rude or whatever. And we ended up taking him out for the night and went to the strip bar. And I remember we're sitting there with the waitress, and she goes, oh, you guys friends? He goes, oh, no, we're going to be fighting each other. And he goes, yeah, we're gonna do a dance, and then we're gonna fight. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm gonna do a dance? I'm not gonna do a dance. What are you talking about, man? And he goes like, no, we're gonna do a dance, we're gonna fight. I said, I'm not doing any dance. He goes, well, and then I'm gonna break his arm. I said, oh, really? That's what he said to the waitress. I said, you ain't breaking nobody's arm. He's like, oh, I'm just joking, man. I'm just joking. I go, okay. I'm already keen to it. So it comes to the end of the night. He goes off in the club. We went to this Japanese restaurant, and he came to the end of the night, and Carlos, he's still picking, but I'm fully aware what he's doing, and picking, and I had enough. And I stood up from the table. I go, the fight's never going to happen. It's going to happen right now, dude. And he goes, what? And I go, no, the fight's going to happen right now. We're not going to the cage. We're not going to the ring. We're going to fight right now, Carlos. I've had enough of you, dude. And he was like, no. He goes to Chris, my partner. No, control me. I can't control Lance. Nobody can control Lance. And then that completely backfired for him. So they kind of separated us from the night. I just said, take this guy out of here. You ain't gonna fight me here. Take him out of here. And we kind of separated for the night. And I said, make sure he's okay. Let him get on his plane tomorrow. But And then I was like, I don't play that. But then his thing, what he likes to do, completely backfired. I don't think he ever fought in Shudo again after that. I think he left and stuff. But that was an interesting scenario that happened to us. And then after that, that's when a couple other people turned me down. I think it was because I did that to Gono. And then Suda took the fight. Went to Japan. Big Japanese cat, man. Big dude, big head.
Tall, yeah.
The night before, I think the day on the weigh-ins, they have those tatami mats. The day before the weigh-ins, they have the mats with the creases in there. So the judo mats. I'm fully dehydrated. I'm doing footwork mat. My foot catches one of the crevices. Snap the ligaments in my ankle. Day before a weigh-ins. I'm like, oh my God, man. Matt, what am I going to do? And he goes, well, we'll tape it. We'll tape both ankles. He doesn't know. I can hardly walk, Miguel. I can hardly walk. It's swollen. The driver who's driving us, well, he's information for Shudo. So that he knows everything that's going on. I can't hide it. And I'm like, Matt said, maybe we get Novocaine. And I'm like, well, what is that? He was a shot. You won't feel anything, but you can't really walk on your foot. I'm like, I don't know about that. So I said, maybe I'll get Tylenol or Advil or whatever. And
can't buy it in Japan.
No. So they go and get me something that I don't know what it was. So they get me this. I take a bunch of these pills. Pray to God that night that I get up. I got to fight for my son. Get up. I go to this fight. I tape up both ankles, I believe. And I get in there. But what I didn't know is they gave me was a major blood thinner. So when the first punch to the fight, my nose starts gushing blood. And I'm snorting the blood and swallowing it so they don't stop the fight. And I'm pissed. Well, I put a beating on them, man. And at that point, I was like, they're gonna try to stop this fight. They know he's going after my bad ankle, so they've told him everything. Because I think I taped up both. And I snorted my blood and punched him. Snorted my blood and punched him. I just freaked him right out. He wanted no part of me. So that was that story behind that fight that night, and I won that fight. That's how that one went. It was a crazy.
Yeah, for sure. A little bit of background there. Paulson was a champion, and he retired. He didn't retire for any other reason other than that Shudo was kind of hampered by their budget, and he really wanted a little more money.
Oh, okay.
He kind of left the belt there, and Suda was the guy who became champion afterwards. Obviously, after fighting you, but that fight originally wasn't for the belt. Then it wasn't to fill the vacant belt or anything like that.
That's the scenario. That's tricky scenario because it was like, okay, we're supposed to be fighting for the belt, and I kind of get there and it's like, oh, we're fighting for the number one spot. And I'm like, well, why would we fight for the number one spot when there's no champion? That doesn't make sense. I think they didn't tested it out. So then I fight for the number one spot. I beat them. Then comes the rematch. They bring me back and say, okay, now you guys can fight for the title. I'm like, well, this doesn't make any. Matt was like, sometimes it just kind of goes this way. I was like, okay. So, but they told me before that fight was, I'm not sure if that's the next fight I did or not, but that was the fight I went back to.
Yep, let me check for you. I was just noticing Joey Gilbert was the main event in that one. Joey's another guy that I helped manage his career. No, you went back to the UFC and fought Evan Tanner.
Okay, yeah.
Suda fight. So we'll get into that. But tell us about what they were telling you.
So then they said, okay, you're gonna come back for the fight, but we want you to fight with honor. No, you fight dirty. We don't want you to fight dirty. I'm like, what do you mean? Hey, you fight dirty. You want you to fight with honor. I remember the president telling me that, and I'm like,
Sakamoto.
Yes, and I'm once again another learning lesson I can pass on to my wife and son who are fighters. That sometimes when you believe in that, you see it and you think everything is about honor. It's not always about honor. There's you gotta realize and understand. And so I went into this fight not being as vicious, more sportsmanlike. And as far as I'm concerned, I won the fight, but I didn't get the decision. But every time I went to shoot and take him down, he'd stick his butt outside the cage and escape. outside the ring. So that might have happened maybe 8 times, no warning, nothing. I'm a gentleman. I'm helping him back in when I should have stomped his head on the outside of the ring. But I'm taking, I should be honorable and this and that. It's not about that. It wasn't about honor. It was about they didn't they didn't want me to win.
Yeah. No, Shudo is for me they were light years ahead with the rules and the catch. I think is a thing that is not given enough credit. The UFC won't even try it, but I think it's actually genius. And they definitely knew their way, but they had an arrogance about them where you did have to behave their way. I'll tell you a brief story. I was the original Shudo representative in the States where we got to do Shudo rules, and I bought a few fighters. One of their guys fought Shaolin for his debut on my show in Indiana.
Oh, wow.
Right? And I had a 125-pounder named Jeremy Bolt, Jason Godsey's student. Excellent fight, excellent little fighter. I don't think I ever hooked him up with Ryan Diaz, but like a very high level guy. Those little guys were so high level for that time. So Bolt was great, and he was fighting another one of my guys, also a good little wrestler. And I submitted the thing to Shudo, and they had the A class, B class crap, right? So they were like, everything's good with the card, but we think this fight should be B class. So now you're putting me in a spot where I got to go back to these guys. And now that means not a 3-round fight, a 2-round fight.
Yeah.
I got to go back and say, you're not an A fight, you're a B fight. Now, this is a position they're putting me in.
Yeah.
So I said to them, I said, okay, fine. Just what I need now is I need an email with exactly what differentiates between A and B. So that I never make this mistake again. They couldn't tell me because it is what the hell they want. You know what I mean? So after that, they named another person the Shudo representative in the States. It was no longer me. You know what I mean? So when you say that they hide behind the honor, a little arrogance, I know exactly what you mean. you know? Yeah. Let's talk about that. You came back to the UFC, so you had beaten Jermaine Andre. Now, is this at 185 or 205 at this point?
205.
Okay, so they didn't have 185 yet, and I believe Monet in a future UFC would win the 185-pound title, but they weren't even doing that weight class yet. So you're at 205 fighting Evan Tanner, who eventually held their belts, and he's no longer with us, so rest in peace and honor, Evan. But what was this fight like? Because Evan was another guy, maybe a little like Carlos Newton, a little bit of that Ronin kind of like weird, kind of quirky guy, and also, unfortunately, an alcoholic. Did you what was your whole experience with Evan Tanner like? I was at this fight.
Yeah. So what happened was I got the Evan Tanner fight, and I remember I know they had me ranked number 1 and him number 2, and then Tito was the champ, and the winner fights the champ. I just thinking the other night, I was telling my son he wants to follow me in the UFC now, under follow my legacy, and he was just like, I was one fight away from fighting for the title against Tito. I remember that, and at the time I was going through a bad business breakup with my partner Franco. We were young, we had our business together, and we had a bad business breakup. And Ryan was probably like 16, 17, and he was my student. He was running the gym, and I remember it was hard for me to train. My mentality, I was dealing with legal things, and the gym, we didn't know if the gym was open or closed, and it was a trying time that I was stressing on that, and getting calls from my 16-year-old student Ryan when I'm in a business breakup, when I'm going to fight in the UFC in Japan. Like, I'm getting phone calls about the gym's not open today, so the doors were locked, and I'm like, oh. But you know what? I still took the fight, but I wasn't in the greatest shape. I wasn't in the greatest shape mentally or physically for that fight. But I was still confident I could win. I prepared most of my camp up in Canada, because I had to be close to my gym, because I was breaking up with my partner at the time. So I didn't get down to Seattle as much. And then to be with Matt. So that fight came out, and I felt really, really good. I mean, in the fight, I felt good. Before the fight, it was just foggy. I could just tell that I wasn't mentally totally there. And I remember catching him with some good strikes. And I remember going in too aggressive and he threw me. And I was like, oh, okay. Strong dude. He's pretty fucking strong. I remember getting my guard back and elbowing the top of his head, and I started seeing blood. I remember, hey man, I'm getting a bit tired here now. It's like I didn't train like I did for Gono or the other ones. And I was on my back. I was tired. It was the emotions and just physicality. And I remember him passing my guard. I remember him getting to side body and elbow me and mount. And I remember I'm just like, okay, I just gotta wait for this round to end, and I'll recoup myself. And I know I won't get taken down this time, and I'll land my strikes. And good old Yamasaki, he jumped in later in his career. He let fights go on too long. Before, he used to jump in too early at the beginning. Well, he jumped in with 7 seconds left and ended the fight, and I was kind of pissed. I was like, oh, 7 seconds left, dude. Come on. And he was known for that at the beginning of his career. At the end, he started doing things differently, like even late, well, too long. So I was like, oh, okay. And I remember going to the hospital after to get my head checked out, and Evan was there, and we had a good talk. It was a good fight. And it was okay. It was a learning lesson for me. Another one was like I wasn't in fully shape. I wasn't fully in shape for that, but I fought a tough guy, and I didn't take it like it was a title contention. It was just that wasn't even in my mind. So that my mindset wasn't there. But that's what I went back to. I got an offer now after that. I think that's when Dana had taken over. Dana offered Matt me to fight Phil Baroni, but I had a chance to fight for the world title in Shooto. And it's like interesting when so I was like, I thought back then we thought Shooto was more prestigious. We thought, oh, Shooto title, I'll go back to the UFC, do whatever. Who says that's the right thing or who says it's the wrong thing? I think I would have beat Phil Baroni. Who knows? And as far as I'm concerned, I thought I beat Suda. I went back and I remember the president telling me, you must fight with honor. You don't fight dirty and this and that. Oh, he likes me. I'm going to listen to him and this and that. I should have been the real Lance and just did. I would have took him out. But we went to 5 rounds. He did a little bit better than the first fight, but I still dominated. But when they put his hand up, me and Matt looked at each other and we're going, "Are you freaking kidding me?" Matt was like, we both shook our head, and I was like, and at that point, Miguel, it was like I was doing movies as well, and I was making good money in the movies. So I was just like, you know what, man, it's ain't about honor, and that was my last fight, man.
Yeah, you ran the full gamut of seeing the ups and downs, though, and I wanted to ask you at this point too. You said Matt and you were in the UFC and stuff like that. At some point, Matt and Dana stopped getting along, and Matt became kind of persona non grata. I think actually, if you look at the official record, I was Ivan Salivari's official manager for his first UFC appearance because I was kind of I wasn't his manager. I was stepping in for Matt, on paper kind of thing. But yeah, Matt became one of those guys like a Monty Cox that Dana just would freeze him out. Did that have an effect on you as well? Where, you, after the shooter thing, you're starting to think about it. You want to bounce back and then you don't get the opportunity to go back to UFC or anything like that. How'd your career end? Was it satisfying to you? Were you done officially or did you want to keep going?
It was satisfying. I got to the point where I had a successful gym. I was doing movies like the movies I've done. I think I'd already done a Jackie Chan movie, Rumble Abroad. I was doing movies, all the TV series. I'm making good money, and fighting was more. I wasn't fighting for the money. It was fighting for the notoriety for my gym. And I was just like, you know what? I don't need to. I've accomplished so much at this point in my life, and I'm doing movies and stuff, big movies. So I'm just like, you know what? I don't need to fight anymore. It was the honor thing. I truly believe that there was honor, and when that hit me like that, I was just like, nah. Just kind of diverted my stuff into. I was content.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
that's good because some people get bitter, and you don't come across, even looking back at it, you never at any point in this interview came across as bitter. You know what I mean? So that's a good thing. That's the kind of thing where it just is about, it says a lot about you. You're a good, positive person for that. Now, you never strayed far from the sport because a lot of people talk about, this guy's from a fighting family or whatever. And I don't know if your father, was a fighter. I'm sure he was tough, right?
Yeah.
But you are a fighting family because you have your wife who became Bellator champion, and she probably has a lot more pro fights than you, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. And so that's Julia Budd, and then
Yeah.
your son has followed in your footsteps, and he, is just about evened out his record with you. But talk about that. Is that satisfying to you also, seeing your son fight and being able to teach him the lessons that, how to improve on what you did and how to avoid the pitfalls and things? Because you've guided his career pretty excellently. You know what I mean? So talk about that whole family atmosphere, and Julia too.
Yeah, you know what? I've realized just more recently. I just got back from a trip from Peru, and I went on a spiritual journey, and
Oh, did you do ayahuasca?
I sure
Okay.
did, bro. Sure did.
Okay. Okay.
And I tell you, it saved my life actually, in the fact that I was living a stress because I'm negotiating hundreds and thousands of dollars, $1 million contracts for my wife. We're a family of three going into organizations where sometimes they don't want us to win, and everybody wants you to lose, and you're in around a gang of guys, and it's a this is a shady business, man. And it's like you think you do something right, and then something could go. You do so good, and then something could go wrong, and then it's like it's a tough thing. But I'm so blessed to be able to do this with my family, and they can learn from what I've been through, and that's helped us a lot. And then even the mistakes or pitfalls we've dealt with my wife's career, my son has witnessed every single thing. My junior's been in fight corners ever since he was 2.5. Back in the day in Matt's AMC gyms, Junior was carrying the bucket. So it's like he's seen it all. He grew up in the gym. He grew up, I mean, like crawling. He grew up in the gym. Like, I mean, like he's around all these fighters. And my wife, and so we were just so lucky to have what we got. And he's just, this kid is something else, man. I mean, like intelligent, well spoken, and an incredible martial artist. It's like he's going to be UFC heavyweight. He'll be a UFC lightweight champion. You watch, mark my words. We will tape this, and when it happens, we'll go back and we'll put it up. He will be the champion.
Okay, and I do appreciate that. Um, we'll talk a little bit about him here as we start to wrap up. But so he's free from his Bellator contract. How did the
Yeah.
thing with the union with the PFL go? How was he, freed from that? Was he free before, or did you not want to go with PFL? What were your thoughts on that whole business aspect of it?
Well, I was dealing with PFL with my wife, and it's a different. They're all their different entities, and Scott Coker has been always a martial artist and a really really great person. I've had a 15-year, maybe more, relationship with him and my family. So it's like when I'm dealing with Bellator, it's like dealing with family. Like when we negotiate, we negotiate. But coming to PFL is a totally different thing, and it's not to say it's right or wrong. It's just the way they run their show, and the UFC is a completely engineered machine that runs theirs the way it is. What we've learned from this whole thing is all that matters. We don't care if you like us or hate us. It's that 15 minutes in the cage, and that's what my son knows. He's witnessed a lot of things over the years. People loving us. My wife's a 4-time champ. Maybe doesn't get to finish one fight. All of a sudden, people are not so happy with her. To coming to an organization thinking it's going to be the grass is green and it's great, and then they want you to lose. Do everybody can to set it up. It's a vicious, tough sport, and unfortunately, we have each other, but unfortunately, we're a family doing this in such a grimy world. Mm-hmm. But we're giving him weapons that he sees ahead of time, so we know not to fall for these things. All my mistakes are all benefits to him and my wife's. So he's seen me negotiate. He's seen me do all these deals. He's seen the treatments of certain places. but I always tell him it doesn't matter. I don't care if they like me or hate me. It's what you do in that cage for that 15 minutes. And that's what he knows, and that's what he's preparing for.
Cool, cool, cool. And we've seen him fight, obviously. And when I saw Lance Gibson Jr., we've been out of touch for so long. I said, this is gonna definitely be somebody to watch, because I remember just the entertainment value of your fights, the gameness and stuff like that. He's got it all. He does have it all. He actually also he's like a 2.0 version too, because
Yeah.
like you could tell maybe nutrition and conditioning and things like that, he's taken to a new level. I mean, you were never a guy that gassed or was at, but you he's got a real different athletic look than you. You know what I mean? You were like kind of
Yeah.
like a little stockier, a little thicker, and he looks, in really good shape. How does that come about? And how do you supplement what you teach, and who else is helping you with it?
Well, right now it's just been me, my wife, and him in our gym. But now we've kind of gone outside. But nutrition wise, he's always known that I've always eaten properly or organic. We actually have a farm. I got about 30 chickens out here, 2 roosters. We got bees. We got 2 orchards. You know, we
That's
fish
awesome.
for our food. We hunt. So everything this is what he's been raised on. My dad taught him how to track animals and this and that. So this is what he knows and loves. So we're a family. We forage for mushrooms. He knows all the different benefits of everything. He's a freaking smart kid, man. So but it's growing up in the martial arts in the gym and being in wrestling in the States was a big thing too as well, where his physique was just made. It was just made throughout the hard work. And then he's not a party. He doesn't doesn't party or drink, and he doesn't. We're our 3 best friends. That's all we do is we train and we hang out. So it's like I don't know about my son going out because my son's here right now.
Yeah.
So we're blessed, and I think that's just that's where his success is going to be even greater because he's stuck to the game plan.
Every once in a while you hear about, families fight and stuff like that. But when there is a difference too, also about having each other's back now. It's like you don't have a doubt in your mind that you have each other's back, and it's nice
Yeah.
to see the success and you um passing it on. And also, like I said, your mindset this whole interview for me was been an eye-opener in that I didn't know what I was going to get, if you were going to be a little bit bitter or a little bit
Nah, nah.
in any way, shape, or form that way. So I thank you a great deal, man. I'd love to do a Julia interview, sometime in the kind of near future, maybe you guys together or just her, because
Yeah.
that's what we do. You mentioned Matyushenko. I've interviewed him. I
Yeah.
have about 400 interviews under my belt already. So we're doing this very seriously here at the MMA Museum. And Lance, um, you just added, you just gave
Thanks.
us a huge blessing with some great stories and a great part of history. You deserve to be remembered, and
Thanks, man.
more than as the guy who brought your kid along, because those early fights in that early Super Bowl era is something that needs to be remembered. And you were there at ground zero, Lance. So I thank you a great deal, man. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you. It's been an honor, Miguel. Thanks a lot, brother. I appreciate that.
All right, so I am going to end it here, and I'll be in touch. I'm going to put the
Yeah,
poster up somewhere in the interview here. I'll be in touch, and hopefully we can line up, maybe your son and also your wife for future interviews.
definitely. 100%.
Cool. Thanks, Lance. Great to get together again. Thanks.
Take care, brother.